On a foggy June morning in 1982, a body was found beneath London's Blackfriars Bridge. A man in a cloak, his pockets filled with bricks and $15,000 in cash, was hanging from an iron railing. His name was Roberto Calvi. The press called him God's banker. The end of this man, who carried the Vatican's most intimate financial secrets, was not merely a murder. It was the declaration of collapse of one of the greatest financial illusions in history. Today, on Finance Through Time, we are exposing a vast shadow economy hidden behind marble corridors and sacred prayers. How the Vatican Bank became the world's most untouchable offshore bank. Brace yourselves, because this story is not about faith, but about the absolute control of power and money. It all began in 1929, with a handshake between a dictator and a pope. When Benito Mussolini and Pope Pius XI signed the Lateran Treaty, the Vatican did not merely become an independent state, it also received one of the largest seed capitals in history. Mussolini paid the church 1.75 billion lira, worth billions of dollars today, as compensation for past territorial losses. This massive influx of cash and government bonds became the foundation of the Vatican's modern wealth. To manage this money, the Istituto per le Opere di Religione, known as the Vatican Bank, was established. On paper, it had a spiritual purpose. In practice, however, it was a financial black hole operating outside Italian law, exempt from taxes, beyond oversight, and completely lacking transparency. Just as today, when trillions of dollars can move without leaving a trace through digital and financial structures that are legal yet effectively untouchable. By the 1960s, this sacred bank had become one of the Cold War's most valuable financial instruments. An institution originally meant for charitable works transformed, precisely because it was subject to no oversight, into a perfect mechanism capable of redirecting global money flows without leaving a trace. It was at this point that two figures entered the stage: the American Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, nicknamed the Gorilla, and Roberto Calvi. Marcinkus was at the head of the bank, and his philosophy was simple: the church cannot be run on Ave Marias alone. Calvi, meanwhile, was the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, one of Italy's largest banks. Using the unshakable shield of immunity provided by religion, this duo built one of the most complex shadow banking systems in history. The system was built on a flawless mathematical trick. Calvi set up dozens of shell companies in tax havens such as Luxembourg, Panama, and Nassau. The Vatican Bank signed letters of guarantee enabling massive loans to these companies, but the borrowers were, in reality, nothing more than paper entities controlled directly by Calvi himself. Billions of dollars disappeared within this labyrinth, used by intelligence services to finance the Cold War's covert operations. From Poland's solidarity movement to regimes in Latin America, a holy yet dirty flow of cash reached everywhere. As history shows, wherever the trail of money is erased, the diversity of actors seeking to use it rapidly increases. But this system was not limited to geopolitics. In the dark streets of 1970s Italy, the financial invisibility provided by the Vatican Bank became an invaluable service for the Sicilian mafia. Millions of dollars from the heroin trade were laundered and injected into the legitimate economy behind the Holy Bank's tax exemptions and sovereign rights. Mafia bosses, politicians, and Vatican bureaucrats gathered at the same secret table, an underground Masonic lodge called Propaganda Due. Calvi was a member of this lodge, part of a shadow government that ruled Italy from behind the scenes alongside generals, spies, and bankers. While prayers were being recited, one of the greatest transfers of wealth in history was taking place in back rooms. As people donated to cleanse their sins, those donations were transformed into speculative instruments in offshore accounts. But like every illusion, this massive credit bubble had to collide with the laws of physics and mathematics. When it was discovered in the early 1980s that $1.3 billion had evaporated from Banco Ambrosiano's vaults, the system turned into its own executioner. Calvi wrote letters to the Pope, warning that the collapse of the system would devastate the Church, but it was already too late. Betrayal would slip out from between marble buildings and stretch all the way to London's cold bridges. Because in financial history, secrets are never hidden forever. One day, the balance sheet always speaks. When Roberto Calvi's body was found hanging from Blackfriars Bridge, the world witnessed not just the death of a banker, but the closing of a financial era. Yet the real mystery was not the body itself, but the empty vaults behind it. When Banco Ambrosiano collapsed, the $1.3 billion hole it left behind was not merely a banking error. It was the moment the system began to consume itself. The Vatican Bank tried to shut its doors to Italian investigators by invoking its famous sovereign rights. Archbishop Marcinkus, though facing accusations of murder and corruption, was protected behind the Vatican walls for 7 years because the laws of a country could not surpass the sovereignty of a holy state. So where did all that money go? As investigators followed the trail, the picture that emerged was chilling. Some of the money financed the mafia's drug routes, some evaporated in the Cold War's dirty operations, and some fueled the P2 Lodge's plans for political assassinations and coups. The Vatican eventually agreed to pay $250 million in compensation, but this was marketed not as an admission of guilt, but as a gesture of goodwill. As in every financial crisis, those outside the system paid the price: savers, small investors, and ordinary people who donated in good faith. For years, Calvi's death was recorded as a suicide, but court cases and forensic examinations opened in 2003 proclaimed the truth. He had been strangled, then hanged from the bridge. Calvi knew too much: where the mafia, the Masons, and the bankers intersected, and which tax havens the holy money flowed into. When he died, those secrets were buried for a time as well. But the Vatican Bank's operating logic as an offshore haven never died. It merely evolved. This scandal also X-rayed modern finance. The offshore structures, shell companies, and anonymous funds used today by global elites, tech giants, and billionaires are, in fact, copies of the secrecy doctrine the Vatican perfected decades earlier. Creating zones where the law cannot reach and oversight cannot penetrate is the most ancient reflex of those who hold power. The Vatican proved how an institution of faith could transform into one of the world's most sophisticated financial fortresses. Today, under the leadership of Pope Francis, transparency reforms are said to be underway. External auditors are brought in, accounts are supposedly being cleaned. Yet by its very nature, that black box behind the marble walls has still not been fully opened. Because the most unshakable law that financial history teaches us is this: power always prefers secrecy over morality. If an institution sells you trust, know that it extracts its greatest profit from the blind spots created by that trust. The bricks in Roberto Calvi's pockets were not just a warning, they were also a symbol: the weight of those crushed beneath the colossal financial towers that had been built. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us centuries ago, external brilliance is the most effective mask for hiding internal decay. True wealth does not lie in the false paradises promised by the system, but in the courage to see reality and remain independent. History does not repeat itself, but from Latin inscriptions to modern stock screens, it advances in the same rhyme. Which temple do you believe in right now? The rising graphs on stock screens, or the invisible hands behind those graphs? Remember, the system sells you comfort and sanctity. The truth can only be earned through your own effort. On Finance Through Time, I will continue to tell what has been pledged, because history has the answers, and I am only showing you where to look.